prom dress. It's right here. It's very simple. But let's get started. Okay, so first, we'll do a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. We'll start with my essential question, and then we'll dive into the fashion industry's effects, how it affects the environment, how it affects social life, how making your own clothes can encourage self-sufficiency, and why choose organic cotton. Then I'll introduce you to my mentor, and then we'll talk about my field experience. We'll talk about the fabric I chose, what an overlock machine is, and the new skills I learned. Hi. And then we'll conclude. My essential question was making clothes and supporting the recycling of used clothes encourages self-sufficiency and has less of an impact on the environment and human health. First, let's talk about what fast fashion is. So fast fashion is cheap and trendy clothing that take ideas from celebrities, celebrity culture, and high fashion models, and turns them into clothes for high street stores like H&M and Zara. Those are two main contributors of pollution in our world today. Why is fast fashion bad? Because the pressure to reduce the costs of these clothes, so you can get a shirt for really cheap, they start to take corners when it comes to thinking about the environment. There's corners cut, and it's not for someone. Some negative impacts are the cheap and toxic textile dyes. They end up in water, and fast fashion is actually one of the largest polluters of clean water globally today, right up there with agriculture. So all that water just ends up right in rivers, right in lakes, right in the ocean. And there's actually some crazy images of just dyes in the water, and it's completely changed their color. It's also bad for wildlife. Yeah, so like I said, H&M and Zara are two companies that are leaders in fast fashion waste and fast fashion production today. So yeah. The effects of the fashion industry on the environment. So 10% of the human greenhouse gas emissions that we create each year come from the fashion industry, and 20% of the global water waste comes from fashion. Less than 1% of clothing is actually recycled or donated or ends up in a thrift store, and the other 99% end up in landfills. It's a crazy number to think about. And there's certain fabrics that can decompose, like organic cottons or organic materials, but synthetic fabrics, and that are made of leggings or athletic shirts, they can take up to 200 years to fully break down. And they also, while they're breaking down, they produce methane gas, and the methane gas is a powerful greenhouse gas that we see in global warming today. Here's an image of a woman who's searching through clothes that come to this desert in northern Chile. Each year, about 60 tons of clothes arrive there, and they're just laid out in the desert, and every year, more and more come. Fashion social effects. Because clothes are cheap, and like I said, you can get a shirt for $7. You can get pants for 15 to 20 sometimes. This really relies on exploited labor in developing countries where rules are more relaxed, and there aren't regulations on how much a worker can get paid, and what their age can be, and how much they work a week. Workers are often underpaid, exposed to hazardous conditions, and often overworked. And a lot of these workers end up being children because there's, like I said, no rules about who can work and what age you have to be to work. And there's 75 million factories in the world. This is a little fact. And only 2% of these workers are actually getting paid livable wages. For example, Lululemon is a very common brand that we all know about. Lululemon. They make very trendy workout clothes, and their leggings are about $100 a piece, but that's how much a worker who works in those factories making those clothes make a month. So next time you're buying a brand new pair of Lululemon leggings, think about that. That's how much one person is making a month. Oh.
I think Megan might have logged into the wrong.
Oh.
History of carpentry.
Not your fault.
Okay, so the history of carpentry.
Here, I'll go let her know. You're doing so well. It's all right. Doing great. I'll just go.
Take a breath.
Sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Doing well.
I'll teach you about the carpentry. Sweet. Oh my god.
It gives you a chance to have civil law.
Some water. I know. I was like at home practicing, and my throat got dry from talking so much. Just read.
Moving around.
Honestly, you know, we play slideshows and videos and things all the time around here. And this
I mean,
is
I can go ahead. It's right
it's
here.
I think it's a poltergeist or something.
Can we see the good
Bluetooth thing, that's right.
Oh, this is short.
Oh, it's Mr. Short. It's not Miss Reed. Of course it's Mr. Short.
It's the shortest computer that they had to use with its orange screen.
Mr. Short! Your computer's connected to the
I think
screen.
someone has this computer.
Okay, well, your computer's connected to yours.
Oh,
I don't know where your computer is, but...
Egan. The mayor.
I want to keep talking. I was really getting into it.
He's on it.
Okay, got a little detour. A little break.
I have a question.
No. Questions are saved to the end, sir.
It's rolling here.
Yeah.
Actually, it'll be fine. Ask me a question. No, I'm just kidding.
Where are a lot of these factories? Where are they located? You know?
There's some in all over Africa, Cambodia, China, all over. Basically any developing country.
So it's
Hi,
a
Alan.
computer.
We're having someone else connected to our screen.
No.
We're reloading back.
Maybe you could try to connect back.
Because it's cast up to our screen.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, let me.
So we
Oh
just
my
change
gosh.
rooms?
I guess that would be a simple solution.
Maybe you could try shutting this TV off.
Are we back?
No.
Oh, okay, so Ida, if you go to the three dots.
Okay, I'm sort of there.
Okay. We should be, let's see, why is the crow mirroring?
Okay, we're back.
Okay, we're on. Okay, let's get back to where we were. Okay, perfect.
See,
This is where we were trying to get to.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I sort of finished it, right? No, I didn't finish my thought. Okay, so back to Lululemon. Next time you buy a pair of leggings from Lululemon. And, yeah, I don't know what that's basically, Lululemon is not all it's cracked up to be. And yes, it's a very common brand, and it's very hyped, but they're still suffering. Okay, so now we're going to talk about self-sufficiency and why making your own clothing can support self-sufficiency. So Gandhi is an example of a man who did that, and here's a little about him. So Gandhi was born in British-occupied India in 1869. He encouraged the people of India to stop buying clothes from Britain and to wear clothes that they made themselves in a non-violent act against Britain to lead to their independence and their freedom from Britain. Now, today, India, their symbol for independence is actually a spinning wheel because of Gandhi, because he's always found at a spinning wheel making thread to create his fabric. Gandhi is an example of a man who created his own garments in a way to become more independent and encourage others to follow him in creating change. I think this is really important because even like in your own life, you can create change. And if you lead that way, it's very helpful. Let's talk about why organic cotton. Organic cotton is made, it's made without harmful chemicals. So the water, air, and soil are free from contamination. And 46% less CO2 emissions come from organic cotton than how traditional cotton is made. There's also less water waste because the farmers are less pressured to produce lots of cotton, and they can use rainwater instead of irrigation, which leads to a lot of water waste. Choosing to support organic cotton and buying organic clothing can help human health, animal health, and the health of our entire world. Okay, now we're getting into my experience, the fun part. Let's talk about my mentor. My mentor's name was Hannah Boyer. She owns her own business where she sells clothes on her website, and she also sells them on Etsy. She uses sustainable and organic materials to create pieces that are comfortable, and she also has quality in mind. She's also really passionate about limiting the negative effects of fashion that fashion has on the environment. So she uses organic cotton to create all the pieces. She mostly makes underwear and bras out of very comfortable, soft cotton. So that's really important to her, she says, to make sure that everyone's comfortable and everyone feels good about what they're wearing. She actually runs her business here in Craftsbury, down in Mill Village. So she's very local, and if you ever want to support a local seamstress, check her out. You just look up her name on Etsy or on Google, and she comes right up. Okay, so my field experience. First, let's talk about the importance of the fabric when you're making your dress. First, I wanted to use silk to make my prom dress because I wanted it to be like a very normal, traditional prom dress that looked very elegant. But I realized it was kind of hard to find silk that was also organic and not extremely expensive, and it was very hard to find like ethically produced silk. So I ended up using a jersey knit cotton. The jersey knit's a single knit cotton fabric, and it's known for its stretchiness and its softness. It's also very natural elasticity, so it doesn't use stretch fibers that are kind of bad for the environment. But you often can find it in a t-shirt, like I said, but I was worried at first that it would not look elegant and not look like I wanted it to look, because I was like, what if it looks too casual? But I ended up doubling like the top to make it more thick, and then so the bottom was more flowy. That was helpful. Some difficulties I found with using jersey knit was if you pull it at all when you sew it, it's actually very stretchy. You can see, so if you pull it at all, like when I was I made like tote bags and a quilt, when you're making that with thick fabric, you really need to pull it so it stays and goes right through your sewing machine. But with this one, if you pull it at all and then it sews, it gets super wobbly, and like the lines are wobbly and not pretty. So that was a habit I had to break when using this fabric, because I had to just let it go instead of being very in control. Also, there's a picture here of my pattern, but it's really important to have your pattern when you cut it out on the grain of the fabric, because if you just plop it in the middle, it will sit weird and it won't fit right on your body. Next, this is an overlock machine. These are really cool. It's also known as a serger. The three functions of this machine is to stitch a seam, to trim the excess seam allowance at the same time, and then to overcast the edge with thread. You can see here, that's the machine. And if you look at any clothes, probably the clothes you're wearing today, there's a little, you can just look at your clothes. There's almost all clothes are made with this kind of machine, and it makes them have this professional looking quality, and it makes them last longer. There's also 4 thread sources used. You can see here, there's the 4, and they all go into the machine at once, and they each have their own thing they're doing. I never actually learned how to thread it because it's super complicated, and you try your best to not get it unthreaded because it takes a while to do it. So instead, you just snip off the spools of thread and you tie little knots, and then it just goes right through. So if you want to change the color, we'd have to do that whenever, because I'd come in and she was working on something, and I'd be like, yeah, time to change, so I'd put on my red, because I was using a different colored red than her. Yeah, so this project was my first time using a serger. I found it really fun. It was also really hard at first, and I definitely struggled, because it is fast, and if you lose control, it could totally just cut off part of your fabric very fast. So I took a lot of time practicing before I went right onto the dress. Okay, so here's some new skills I learned. These are really brief, but I'll talk about them more. So I learned how to use notches. I sort of made some notches on this thing to show you because it's confusing. So if you can sort of see them, there's just like little snips you make in the fabric that when you're sewing, you line them up and that you're used instead of pins. So you can get to them and you don't have to have a pin in the way, because if a pin got in the way of your serger or Overlock Machine, it might break it. So it's a helpful way when you're just sewing along to make sure you're like staying lined up and it's not going to get uneven. Yeah, I also learned about soap lines. These are something really simple and easy, but I just thought they were really cool. It's basically just soap. Instead of using like a marker or a pencil, you just use like Dove soap, and it like makes a white line right on your fabric, but it just comes right off. I thought it was really cool and it was really helpful because instead of having like a stained black line on your fabric from a marker or something, you can just have a little soap line. Yeah, I also learned how to use a double stitch machine. It's very similar to just a regular machine, but it has 2 needles. And I use that for the entire edge of my dress. Oops. I was going to show people anyways. I don't know if you can really see it, it's kind of hard, but it's all around the edge. There's like a double stitch to make it look very clean and very professional looking, because if not, it was just like a raw edge. This was really hard to do, honestly. I was sitting there for like 40 minutes, making sure every part was perfect. But yeah, it was really helpful because it makes it look clean instead of just being 1 stitch. It's 2, and it looks really nice. I also, this is sort of a joke, but I sort of became a professional seam ripper. Because things happen and you make mistakes, but it's gonna happen. You're gonna have to rip stuff out. If you don't like something, you can always change it. So yeah, I also learned patience with that. It's kind of hard to see, but this is like a little sewing needle. And for this part of my dress, this slit, it went all the way up here and I wanted to sew it down. And I thought, how am I going to do that? So I was like, let's try it by hand. So I thought I would use a technique to do an invisible stitch by hand. And so I sat down and I sewed it, and then it ended up having like some holes in it when I put it on. So I became the seam ripper and I ripped it all out again. But I like things to kind of just happen, but it's really helpful when you have to practice your patience. Like things don't always go your way and then you have to start over. But it's okay because it works out in the end. Okay, to conclude, making my prom dress is very empowering. Oh! Okay, I don't need the slide for this. I can conclude it anyways.
I think you just click over back to your slide. It's for some reason or is somebody else operating the mouse?
Yeah, that's a different thing.
It's a different okay, it's okay. All it is just a random photo of my little pattern. It's not that important. The rest is just talking about. This project was really empowering for me. It made me think about how people all around the world do this every day, and they're not as lucky to have it as something they just get to do for fun. They're doing it every day, and I felt really lucky just to be able to go and learn something new and work hard and feel really empowered, and like I did something by myself with my hands, and I worked really hard. It's also kind of like my zen. It's a place where I go and I want a safe space. If I'm feeling stressed, it's helpful. And just go and sit down in my little sewing machine and sew away. Time kind of just flies by when I'm sewing. I'd get to Hannah's and like 4 hours would go by and we'd both be like, oh my gosh, we gotta go. She has to get her daughter. I had to go pick up my brother from school. But it's really fun when you find something that you like to do that just makes the time fly. It's also helpful for my mental health. I've struggled with anxiety, and it really helps to just have a place to go and relax and to take your mind off things that you're worrying about and to focus really deeply on something that you care about. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know. I know I couldn't cover it all, but I tried. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I'd love to answer them.
Yeah.
Yes?
Can you tell us some more about the specific fabric you chose and where it came from?
Yeah, so it actually came from a company that Hannah used. I'm not sure of the exact name, but she uses it for all of her stuff. So she actually had it. So I didn't have to. I did a lot of research to find fabric. like online, but it was just so hard to find one that like, I was like, I don't know what it's gonna feel like, I don't know what it's gonna look like, I don't know how it's gonna stretch. And Hannah was like, I really know how to use this fabric, like, we'll be able to make it work. So we ended up just using that. And it is organic, and it's grown organically and produced organically as well. Yeah.
My presentation on ethical chocolate. In this presentation, I'll be talking about some of the issues within the chocolate and cocoa industry and ways that we can work towards positive change. Some of the issues I will be touching on will be poverty, deforestation, and child labor and trafficking. Up here on the screen, I have a picture of a cocoa pod that's split open, and inside is actually cocoa beans in the making. Before they turn into the brown cocoa beans we're used to seeing, they are laid out on the cocoa leaves actually, and fermented for a few days, and then they're laid out to dry until they turn brown. My essential question is, why should we purchase chocolate ethically, and why should we encourage change? This is all taking place usually in West Africa, in the Ivory Coast and Ghana area. In the border is where Ivory Coast is. Yeah. My first topic I will be touching on is poverty. So, cocoa farmers only see a very small percentage of a chocolate bar sold. So, for example, if you go to a gas station and you purchase a $3 chocolate bar, they're only going to be seeing about 9 to 21 cents of that chocolate bar, which is a very small percentage, and it's exactly 37%. In the Ivory Coast, a living wage is $170 a month, which may seem a bit strange because here in the US, we seem to spend more than that weekly. And in Ghana, the minimum wage is $2.07 an hour. So these labor workers are only making about $1 a day, which is not at all a living wage according to either of these wage trackers. In 2016, there was an oversupply of cocoa because a lot of people wanted to get into cocoa farming and start selling it and making a profit. But this caused an oversupply because so many people were growing it and no companies were wanting to buy the excess cocoa. So the Ivorian Market Board decided to slash the prices by 37% in order to sell this excess cocoa. And this was taking the already limited incomes of these farmers and cutting it by 37%. Chocolate companies like Mars and Nestle and Hershey all make about $100 billion a year, while the average cocoa farmer is only making about $200 a year. And also cocoa is only harvested in certain times of the year, and so they're only making their little profit during certain times of the year, and they have to figure out how to support themselves during the entire rest of the year. One of the other issues with the cocoa industry is the outdated agricultural harvesting ways. They still climb up these trees and use machetes to cut down the cocoa pods, and this is seen as a very medieval technique because with corn and wheat, there are such updated ways to harvest it. The reason that they're not able to have modern technology is not because it's not available, but because they simply wouldn't be able to afford it. So manufacturing companies decide not to create it so they aren't lacking money. The next topic I will be talking about is deforestation. In West Africa, there are about 244 protected forests. Out of those 244, about 44 of those are still growing and thriving and aren't disturbed. This is due to cocoa farmers growing their cocoa in these protected forests. The reason they do this is because you will get a faster produce in a protected forest because of the uncultivated soil. So it will only take about 2 to 3 years maximum to have cocoa start producing, and so you are able to sell it. In their normal soils and in their normal farming lands, it'll take about 5 to 6 years to start producing cocoa. So they go to these national parks and protected areas in order to make a faster profit, simply. And this all ties back to poverty. About 500,000 tons of cocoa has been grown in protected forests. So about over 40% of cocoa from the Ivory Coast alone is grown in protected forests. The next topic I will be talking about is child labor and trafficking. Child labor is commonly used within the cocoa industry because it's simply cheaper labor, and farmers aren't going to have to guarantee that they're paying these children. These children are easily convinced to go to these cocoa plantations because over in West Africa, especially in more rural areas, there aren't many rich families. So these children get told they can possibly make money, and either their parents or they themselves decide that it's a good idea to go to cocoa plantations to work. The issue with this is that they aren't always promised money, so most of the time this is just child slavery. And also usually if children say they don't want to go with these traffickers, they get abducted from big meetings like markets and stuff, where there's large groups of people. Ali Lakis is the CEO of a large exporting company called Self-Cacao. It's actually the 3rd largest cocoa exporting company. He was interviewed by Miki Mistrati, the director of The Dark Side of Chocolate, and he stated that he had never seen child labor at all throughout his entire experience with working with cocoa plantations. He denied it, and he was very adamant that it simply wasn't happening. Later within the film, he was shown some footage of Interpol rescuing 65 children from a cocoa plantation where Self-Cacao actually purchased cocoa. And he then admitted, after being shown that footage and kind of having the proof, like, you are lying, that there was issues with child slavery within the cocoa industry. Miki Mistrati, the director, he also contacted large companies like Mars, Nestle, and Hershey, and he asked them if they would be willing to watch the footage of the child labor in the plantations and comment what they had to say, basically. All of these companies denied, and they actually had a shared spokesman send out a statement, and I actually have a clip from the statement here stating, "The vast majority of cocoa farms are not owned by the cocoa companies that make chocolate or supply cocoa, and we therefore don't have direct control over cocoa farming and labor practices. The industry will not accept responsibility for these conditions." Even if these cocoa companies had did not have direct control over the practices in the plantations, they do have control over where they're purchasing their cocoa. The reason that they don't purchase cocoa from ethical sources is simply because they don't want the price of their product to go up, because then they will have the chance of losing customers, because customers simply are getting used to the cheaper price of chocolate, and they sort of turn away from the idea of buying more expensive chocolate. The large cocoa companies would have to have people go and monitor these plantations and make sure there isn't child slavery going on, and they will also have to make sure that the farmers and all of the workers in the plantation are making a fair and living wage, which is all money. In 2000, there was a slavery documentary released about the cocoa industry, and many people were very upset and angry about that. And so the cocoa industry sort of shushed them by having many documents that these large cocoa companies such as Mars, Nestle, and Hershey signed. And one of them was the Harkin Protocol, which was created in 2001, a year after the documentary was released. The Harkin Protocol was a promise to monitor and police child labor within the cocoa industry, and they set a deadline by 2005 that there would be no more child labor within the cocoa plantations at all. They did not meet this deadline, and they still haven't. Matter of fact, according to a study done by Newark at the University of Chicago, shows that child labor has not only continued, but has increased by 14%, and there are an estimated 2 million children in the Ivory Coast and Ghana working in cocoa plantations now. What we can do. So of course, the first thing we can do is share this information with people you know, and educate ourselves. There are also two different things we can directly do, which is purchasing direct trade or bean-to-bar chocolate, which means that the chocolate makers will go out to these farms and they will make relationships with the farmers. So there is full transparency, and there's a relationship between the chocolate makers and the farmers. So it's nice to know that your product has a good history. Another is checking where your chocolate is coming from. If it doesn't state where it comes from, you could probably assume that it comes from West Africa. Good chocolate is from usually South America because they police and monitor child labor a lot more, and they have stricter policies about child labor. These are some of my favorite companies, Tony's Chocolate Only and Taza Chocolate, and those are my two favorite products from them, which I actually have. In conclusion, learning all of this isn't supposed to make you feel bad about purchasing a Hershey's bar, but it's giving you the information to make educated decisions when you go to purchase chocolate. There's a quote up here from Hank John Bettman, who works with Tony's Chocolate Only, that states, "If you know what's going on at the beginning of the value chain, it's not possible to enjoy chocolate." I think that's wrong. I think we need to learn how to start enjoying chocolate again, and I think we can do that by purchasing ethical chocolate and knowing that your product has a good history and that everyone within the product's history is being treated fairly. And this is just some more cocoa pods. Yeah, that's all. Any questions?
Now I know why we buy that expensive chocolate.
Any questions?
Very good.
Okay, well, I have chocolate if anyone wants any.
We get not.
Yeah, so,
Ethical chocolate.
yeah.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
What about the other ingredients that are in chocolate besides the cocoa? Did you look into those at all?
Slightly. I definitely looked into palm oil, which has a history of being sourced unethically, and it has actually caused wildfires over in West Africa. I was originally going to make my project based around that, but I decided to have more of a target group to look into.
Do some of those other companies make sure they're sourcing other ingredients like the pump, any oils or sugar
Yes.
also ethically?
Yes.
When you were looking at Nestle, did anything else, when you were researching this, did anything else scandalous pop up about them that you noticed?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. So my mentor Berlin and I were trying to figure out like what I was going to focus on, because I was wondering beauty, because there's so many unsustainable practices within many industries, and the article that actually got me interested in chocolate was about Nestle and all of their scandals, and I found out not just about their chocolate, but a lot about the dry milk that they have, and yeah, but I didn't look into it much further than the article. There are definitely other things wrong with Nestle. Any other questions? Yes, Ms.
Somebody might have already asked this, but do you eat chocolate bars?
Yes, I do eat chocolate.
And what kind do you eat, and would you recommend?
My favorite, I only had time to cut up some, but my favorite is the Tony's Chocolate 70% dark, and then the Taza Mexican discs, and it's vanilla, and it is absolutely delicious, which I actually cut up. So. But yeah, I definitely enjoy this chocolate, and I purchase it mostly. Any other questions?
Did anybody, I'm sorry I had to leave, but did anybody ask you how you became so invested in this topic?
Yes, we actually touched on it a little bit before, but I was sort of looking for what target I wanted to educate people about, and I was looking at the beauty industry, I was looking at all these other industries, even agriculture, and I came across an article about Nestle and all of their controversies within their business, and I decided to do it about chocolate.
And Felicia, I just want to say, being your mentor, this was so fun to assist you in and just watch you dive into. And I just love when you were sitting at my kitchen table and you said, okay, I need to just focus on one more dark piece, and then I need to turn to the light because it's really dark. And I really, like, that was such an awareness of self that I think I've said that story like 10 times to different people, like, just to know that about yourself, and yeah, to be like, okay, I need to now focus on some bright things, like what can we do, how can we change this, like, because I think in our whole world we can focus on the dark, but it's like that's not going to help anything. So like, okay, let's shine some light.
I remember that moment exactly too.
Yes. You did really good.